Hey guys, Political Junkie 2414 here, and welcome back to another 2024 Senate election related video. In today's video, we're going to be talking about another high stakes Senate race that will be occurring a year and a half from now. That election will be in the state of Montana, and this is going to be a very interesting one because it is home to one of the last red state Democrats in the United States Senate, Jon Tester. He is seeking re-election, but in a presidential year, he is vulnerable to a Republican challenger. The presidential cycle will likely see DeSantis or Trump win the state by a large margin, and so that will be concerning. It is concerning for Democrats because Tester will almost certainly overperform Joe Biden or whoever the Democratic nominee for president is. But will it be enough to hang on and win another term in this ruby red state? But before we get into that, want to say a couple of things. Make sure, first of all, make sure that you like the video if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and turn on notifications so that you won't miss another political video like this. And share these videos with someone that you think would enjoy them. Now, I just referred to Montana as a ruby red state, and while in many ways it is a red state, I don't know if I call it ruby red. Yes, it did vote for Donald Trump in 2020 by a safe margin of about 16 points, but Democrats have had successes there at the more local level. Now, federal races are very different from localized races, but if you look back to the beginning of the century in 2000, you see George W. Bush won Montana by about 25 points over Al Gore. He won 58% of the vote. Gore got 33%, and Ralph Nader, the Green Party candidate, he got an impressive 6%. This was one of his best states. Fast forward to 2004, Bush nationally does better, but he does 5 points worse in Montana. Now, he gains more of the vote, but John Kerry got about 39% of the vote in here, so in Montana, which not very impressive, but still a leftward shift, still, a sign, like a lot of other red states here, Bush did do worse in 2004 than he did in 2000. You see Wyoming did about a point worse, same in Idaho, so not super surprising, but compared to the shifts in those two states, kind of interesting how Montana narrowed up by 5%, although again, you could attribute that to Ralph Nader. In 2008, the state was a lot closer. John McCain did not even get 50% of the vote in Montana. He only won it by about 2 points against Barack Obama. Now, keep in mind this was in a blue wave year. Obama, was very in a very good position nationwide, and he could have carried Montana. Now the reason he didn't, I think, is just because of the extreme partisanship of the state. And I think that John McCain, overall was not a good candidate to run nationwide. But again, Republicans were viewed very negatively at the time. This was during the Great Recession period. George W. Bush was very unpopular. The economic crisis was mainly blamed on the GOP. So it makes sense why Montana was actually pretty close. Now, 2012 cannot say the same thing. Mitt Romney won the state by 14 points over Obama, but still a respectable showing for the incumbent president. Now, in 2016, Montana goes back to being this solid red state. Trump won it by about 20 points, and yeah, it was not super close. Hillary Clinton did not even get 36% of the vote. Then in 2020, much like in 2004, Trump wins it by a noticeably lesser margin. Joe Biden managed to crack 40% of the vote in Montana, and he was able to do pretty well in the urban areas. If you look at Missoula, which is home to Helena, I believe, the state capital, he did about 8 points better, and he did a lot better in most of these urban areas. Excuse me, like Gallatin, which I think is home to. I don't think it's home to many big cities, but you got Bighorn here. This is an overpopulated county. And overall, Trump did pretty poorly in Montana in 2020 compared to 2016, but he still won it. Now, let's talk about Jon Tester's history. Jon Tester was first elected in 2006 during the blue wave midterm election cycle that came in the middle of George W. Bush's second term. He beat incumbent Republican Senator Conrad Burns, who was very popular, or very unpopular, I should say, and only won his reelection in 2000 by about 3 points, even though, Bush, as I showed at the beginning, earlier on in the video, won the state by over 20 points. So, yeah, big underperformer, and Tester was able to beat him. This is a pretty significant victory for Democrats. If they had not won Montana, they would not have won the Senate because at the time Dick Cheney was the vice president, and in a 50-50 Senate, Republicans would have had power at this time, even if Democrats flipped all of these seats, even if they had still won Virginia, Ohio, Missouri, all these states. But Montana was one of the closest races behind the only second to Virginia, and yeah, it was very impressive that Tester was able to win in a state that Bush won by 20. Now in 2012, Tester was very vulnerable, and he did win. He expanded his margin against the Republican Congressman Danny Rayburg, I believe it was his name. Um, Now, as you can see, there was a lot of ticket splitting here between Rayburg and the Libertarian candidate, so you could argue perhaps that's what gave Tester the race, but at the same time, getting 49% of the vote as a Democrat in Montana is very good. And when you compare it to the margins, at like Sherrod Brown and let's say Claire McCaskill, you can see that Montana really didn't move that much compared to its election in 2006. Yes, it moved 4 points to the left, but we're not talking, a 13-point shift or a 6-point shift. It's just 4 points. That's really not that much. Now go, fast forward to 2018. This is after Trump won Montana by 20 points. And Tester wins again against the Republican. Was I think Matt Rosendale was the Auditor General, I believe at the time. He's a representative now, but I think he was the state auditor. And yeah, Tester was able to win. I think mainly because it was a blue wave year, which and an off election cycle, not off election cycle, but it was not a presidential year, which meant that first of all, Republicans, there was lower turnout from rural areas, and people were also more, there wasn't a presidential race at the top of the ballot to make voters more polarized. And also, it was a Democratic wave year. Donald Trump was very unpopular, which is not unusual, but you get the point with midterm history. Although 2022 kind of proved us wrong, but point being taken, Tester had a lot working in his favor. He was able to win re-election by about 4 points. And yeah, this was a pretty impressive victory. Especially when considering that a lot of red state Democrats lost in 2018 in their Senate races. You had, excuse me, we had Heidi Heitkamp in North Dakota who voted to overturn not overturn, but voted against Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation to the Supreme Court, just like Tester, but yet she lost by 11 points. Now, North Dakota is obviously, a lot redder than Montana, but, let's go down the line and see some of her red state Democrats who lost. Claire McCaskill, I'm sure you've heard of her, lost to Josh Hawley, I'm sure you've heard of him. She was another one who voted against um, voted against um, Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation. Sorry, I had a complete, just my brain completely broke. But yeah, that's basically what happened there. And in Indiana, similar case, Joe Donnelly lost to Mike Braun, the same Mike Braun who's now retiring from the Senate to run for governor. And Donnelly also voted against Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation. Now, Tester did as well, and I'm not saying that Kavanaugh voting against Kavanaugh's confirmation was a bad thing in general. I think most of the American people did not want him to be on the Supreme Court, but in these rural red states with Democrats, it definitely didn't help them. And Tester was someone who voted against it, but I think he was able to win because of his charisma. I think that Montana is also a bluer state, than most of these other states. And I think that Tester just has, he has more charisma. And like Joe Manchin, he was able to win narrowly in a deep red state. Although Manchin was the only Democrat who voted for confirming Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court, which I think is why which I think is part of the reason why he was able to hold on in this race. Although he still won narrowly. When we talk about West Virginia, we will mention that bit. But point being taken, Tester was one of the few red state Democrats who survived in 2018. alongside Joe Manchin and Sherrod Brown. Now, all three of them are up for re-election in 2024. All three of them are going to be in the fight of their lives, especially Joe Manchin, who I think is at a heavy. He's going to have a really hard time winning his re-election. But we're focused on Montana right now. Montana, I would say, Jon Tester is definitely a strong candidate. He is, the Senate's third most moderate Democrat behind Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema. Although he is a lot less, he doesn't make as many headlines because he often votes with the party leadership a lot more. Now, that could be a problem for him in Montana, especially in a presidential year. But the thing is, Tester's got a really high approval rating. I was looking at a poll, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, and, it was saying Chester's approval rating is like 60% among Montanans as of right now, and that's really high for a Democrat in Montana. Now, is he going to win the state by 20 points? Absolutely not. He's not getting 60% of the vote in this state. But what I can say is that even if there are a lot of Republicans who approve of him but are not going to vote for him, I think that there's a lot that will vote for him, or there are a lot. He will win independents, and I do think that he is, in the end, going to be able to fight off a challenge from, the GOP. Although, again, this is a toss-up race. It's Montana. It's in a presidential year. It's going to be very close. But looking at his approval rating and looking at the bench of Republicans that are going to run against him, I would bet towards Tester right now. Now, who is on the GOP side that is considered a potential candidate? Well, Greg Gianforte has declined. He's the governor of Montana. He could have ran, but there's speculation he could have, and if he did, he probably would have beaten Tester. But he has decided not to, and he's probably going to run for re-election instead. And of the publicly expressed interest column, we have the Attorney General of Montana, Austin Knudsen. Don't know a lot about him. I won't speak too much about him. I don't really know much about his electoral history. But when you talk about candidates like Matt Rosendale and Ryan Zinke, I'm much more familiar with them. I don't think either of them are very good candidates. Rosendale, on one hand, as I said, he ran against Tester in 2018. He lost. I think that he had a lot of scandals that were dragging him down. And now he has kind of made a name for himself in the House of Representatives. If his name rings a bell, it's probably because you remember him from when he was one of the few representatives who were still holding out for Kevin McCarthy, who were still holding up the process of Kevin McCarthy becoming Speaker of the House. And Rosendale has gotten a lot of pressure to run. I think that ultimately he is going to run, but he may have to face off against the other representative, Ryan Zinke. Now, Zinke is someone who was actually representative before, when the state only had one at-large congressional district. As you see, he got elected in 2014, took office in 2015. That's how it works. You always take office the next year. Then he retired in 2016, and he became the Secretary of Interior during the Trump administration. Now, he's very scandal-plagued. I won't get too much into it, but he had a lot of scandals that have dragged him down, and then he decided to run again in 2022. And even though he was in a Trump plus 7 seat, was widely expected to win, really had no chance of losing, he almost did. If you look back at the House election results, we can go to his district right here. He only won by about 3 points against Monica Tranel, who was the Democratic nominee. Really didn't get a lot of funding, and this race I thought could this district could be competitive in the future. I think everyone kind of knew that Zinke wasn't that great of a candidate, but no one thought he was only going to win by 3. I mean, there was like some poll I think before the election that showed it kind of close, but this was a shocker, especially because Democrats were leading in this state, in this district, for a while, and it took days to call this election. So Zinke, is not a good candidate. Whether or not he runs or not, I don't know. I think he's probably going to stick to his district, and he'll probably win re-election, although that is not guaranteed. Especially with Tester on the ballot, who could excite Democratic turnout and pull a Democrat over the finish line. But I think Rosendale's right now the more likely candidate. Another wild card is apparently Tim Sheehy, who is the founder and CEO of Bridger Aerospace. He's been a lot of people have been trying to get him to run. I think that Greg Gianforte decided to endorse him. I think Republicans are really trying to look for this guy, and I think that that kind of shows you how bad the bench is in Montana. Is that they're literally recruiting this this no name, this CEO of this company who I shouldn't say some nobody, but I guess you get my point. This political outsider, who really has no connection to the state, really hasn't ever really been floated around as a name in politics, at any point in the past. And I know that you may say, oh, Trump was never mentioned. Well, he was never in politics, and then he became president. But the thing is, he did actually express interest in running for president for a very long time before he ran. So this Tim Sheehy, guy, I don't know who he is. I don't know much about him. But either way, I'm not holding my breath for him. Maybe he runs, but I doubt he would actually win. Although you never know. Sometimes these primaries are hard to predict. But right now, I'm gonna guess it's a rematch of Tester and Rosendale. Now, I don't think Tester's gonna win by 4. Again, I think that in a more polarized national environment, it's gonna be harder for him. But right now, even though it's a toss-up race, I do see Tester narrowly holding on by about half a point. I think that he can keep enough voters on his side. I think that if there's one thing he's shown us, it's that he has, he has a stable coalition. Unlike Joe Manchin, who won by 24 points in 2012, granted against a bad candidate, but still outran Obama by almost 50 points. I think maybe more than that at the presidential level. Then in 2018, a bluer year, Manchin only wins by 3. When he voted to confirm Brett Kavanaugh, and yes, he was running against the Attorney General, Patrick Morrissey, but I don't think he was that great of a candidate. Much like Rosendale, he had a lot of scandals, a lot of skeletons in his closet, and he still came within 5 points of beating Manchin. He didn't, Manchin didn't even get 50% of the vote, and Tester did. So, you know, and if you look at Sherrod Brown in Ohio, he, has had a has had a more, stable history than, Joe Manchin, who also, was first elected in 2010, and he won that by 10 points, but, still, big swings, between then. And, yeah, in Ohio, Sherrod Brown, yes, he won by 12 in 2006, he won by 6 in 2012, and then he won by 7 in 2018, so fairly decent margins. But again, we'll talk more about these two states in the future. What I'm trying to convey here is that there are less swings in these states, and there have been bigger swings. In the margins that Brown and Manchin have won by in these past couple of cycles than Tester. Tester, I think, has shown us that he is a stable and strong coalition, and I think that he is, good enough, a good enough Democrat to be able to hold on in this state. I think Montana is, generally trending to the left. I don't think it's competitive in 2024 at the presidential level, but it's definitely got a competitive House district. I think he may even lose that seat, depending on how well Tester does, because I think he would help the Democratic candidate there. And of course, he got the Senate race, where I am currently projecting that Jon Tester would win re-election. Although it is uncertain, I think that he could really get tied to Biden, really get tied to the National Party, and I think that that is something Democrats need to be mindful of. I don't think that they can just wave a wand at this race and imagine that it's a race that's just going to go for them just because Tester's popular. Because sometimes popularity does not always turn does not always push you over the finish line. Just look at Steve Bullock in 2020. So, anyways, I think that's really all I gotta say here for this video. Right now, basically my take is Montana's a red state, will vote Republican on most levels in 2024, but I do think Tester right now is a favorite to win re-election. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to like, as I said at the beginning, like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, share this content with someone that you think would enjoy it, and yeah, just spread word of the channel. Check out my non-political channel, Interactor127, and my comrades channel, GrowlingZoo666. And yeah, I'll be back to talk about some of these more Senate races in the future. You guys have yourselves a wonderful, wonderful day, and I'll see you next time when I talk about all things politics. See ya.